when the record company heard it, they said, we're going to put everything behind this record. Over Christmas time, when our record was out, the electric was going off at 10 o'clock at night because there were coal strikes. On a Thursday night, you put the telly on, top of the pops, everybody loved it. I got diagnosed 5 years ago, and they said, you got 6 months to live. We were living in a bubble. We didn't know anything outside of the band. We didn't really know how big we were.
In December 1973, Slade were riding high on success. They'd had 3 number-1 singles in that year alone, and Merry Christmas Everybody would be the Christmas #1, staying in the charts until February. But in contrast, the country was stuck in a rut of 3-day weeks, industrial strikes, an oil crisis, and conflict in the Middle East. It was an unsettling time, not too dissimilar in many ways to the current climate we find ourselves in 2023. It's 50 years since Slade's Christmas single, which would go on to be part of the soundtrack to Christmases across the country and across the years. 50 years which has seen glam rock make way for countless other musical styles and fashion faux pas. But that Christmas single can still be heard in front rooms, cars, shopping centres and school halls up and down the country.
I get shouted at probably every day of the year. Somebody shouts me catchphrase from the end of the song. But obviously in November, December, especially if it's getting up to Christmas, I'll get it 40, 50 times a day. And the funny thing is, I take it in good art, it's what I'm known for now. I understand that. Everybody thinks it's the first time somebody's ever shouted it at me. It's 50 years old this year.
Well, it is. And that was one of the main reasons that we wanted to talk to you. And I'm really pleased you're here. Because,
in person, yeah.
Yeah. It's been a difficult few years. Health-wise. How are you?
I'm all right. Yeah, I'm on a level playing field at the moment. They never tell you you're cured, which, they never do with any cancers. I got diagnosed 5 years ago. And it's strange, really, because I didn't know about esophagus cancer at all. Apparently, it's not really been heard of. It's not got much profile. Of course, they give me 6 months to live because it was well advanced. I hadn't had any major things that would let me know, except I was a bit anemic, and I thought that was just old age creeping on, and, was a bit weak, wasn't able to do things I'd done. But I thought, you get to your 70s, you think that's going to happen anyway. And they took me in and they said, well, you got 6 months to live. And
how do you react, though, to something like that?
Well, you get scared. But with me, I have a very good outlook on life. I always have, even as a kid. I was more worried for me missus and me kids and me grandkids than I was for me, wondering how it was going to affect them. With me, I do live life day to day, and I thought, well, I've had a great life. I've done a lot of good stuff in my life. I've had a lot of fun. If the end is in sight in 6 months, I'll see it through.
Did you resign yourself to that?
Yeah.
Then?
Yeah, absolutely. Resign myself to it totally.
Does it focus you, though, on what's really important in life?
Well, I've always been, ever since I come off the road, I've been very focused on spending more time with my family. I've always been focused. Like I left the band in the mid-90s.
92, I think.
Yeah, 92, around there. And from then on, one of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons I left the band was because I wanted to spend more time with my family. I hadn't seen my 2 elder daughters, who are both in their 40s now. I hadn't seen them growing up hardly. I hadn't been to the nativity play or seeing their school.
Yeah, but you were out earning a living.
I was out doing my thing.
To give them a good life.
Absolutely, that's true. And they understand that. You don't get that time back. And then when I got divorced at the end of the 80s, and my dad died at the end of the 80s, I thought, I've got to prioritise here. I'd been with the band 25 years. I'd been on the road for 30 years because I was in bands before Slade. And I thought, I've got to prioritise, see my dad more than my dad, before he passed on. I met Susan, who's now my wife, And then we got married, and of course we had Django. Me and Susan had Django in the mid-90s, in 95.
Django Reinhardt, named after.
He was named after Django Reinhardt, the jazz guitarist. Yeah, he was. And I always thought if I had a boy, I always wanted to call him Django. And I thought it was a great name. And he loves it. He loves the name. And I thought, well, I'm not going to go out on the road again and do things that are going to take me away from home more than 2 or 3 weeks at a time, because I wanted to see him growing up. Yeah. What I'd missed first time around, I wanted to see him growing up, and that's how I've led my life, really.
I mean, it's a very personal thing, you know, to you when you got ill, and it's only recently that you've told everybody about it. So the process of treatment as well.
It was a very, very strong bout. They told me at the Christie Hospital in Manchester, a big cancer hospital there, and my consultant there, Professor Mansour, and he said, well, there is one alternative we can try on you. We've got this treatment that we have had some success with. He said it's very high-powered treatment. We never usually give it anybody over 60. He said, but with your mental attitude, which I think was very important to him, he says, with your mental attitude, can we try it out? You know, it's a trial. You know, we're still trialing it. Said, but it has worked on much younger people. And he says, will you be part of the trial? And I said, yeah, I'll go for it. What alternative had I got, quite frankly? And he says, right, I will give it a trial. And it was a very, very strong. I mean, very, very strong. And that went on for a few weeks. And then, of course, your resistance is low when you finish the treatment. And then you've got to get back to some sort of health.
Was this during COVID as well?
Well, it was coming up to COVID. COVID made it even more dangerous than if I'd have caught COVID or anything. When I was recovering, it would have been back to square one.
So your hair was on its way.
My hair was gone.
You were wearing a mask.
I was wearing a mask, so people didn't.
I was going to say,
recognise
there's
me.
no chance of anybody shouting it's Christmas to you.
No, they didn't. Every cloud has a silver lining.
Every cloud.
So it was a bit of that, and I mean, I was spotted occasionally at the hospital, where when I was going in for my checkups and I still have to have scans regularly, and but I was spotted a few times, but I just blanked it. I didn't put it out in the press or anything. I didn't want media attention on it at all.
No.
I wanted to cope with it in my own way. I didn't want the family to get media attention, because that would have made it much worse for them too. The only people we let know outside of the family circle were very, very close friends that I knew I could trust and not, spread it about.
You've become part of everybody's Christmas, really, for 50 years. This is 1973. What was it like for you at home as a child at Christmas time?
I was an only child, but my mum had fostered kids all through my life. So we always had a family Christmas, and it was always the same pattern. I mean, I do it today. We have pretty much the same pattern today. I call it Groundhog Day, because we do pretty much the same thing. I mean, today, if we're not going out to Christmas lunch, and usually I cook the Christmas lunch if we're staying at home, but I cook it. I do all the cooking at home anyway, but I particularly show off with Christmas lunch, and all the family love my Christmas lunches. And if we're not going out, we stay in our pyjamas all day, the whole family.
You and millions of others, I'm sure.
I stay in our pyjamas. So we do what every other family does. We watch the telly, we have a bit of a sing-song round my guitar. But in my youth, we did pretty much the same. We used to get up Christmas morning. We had a stocking with an orange in. We'd usually have an annual, so it'd be the Beano or the Dandy or one of them. One of them mesh bags with chocolate coins in, covered in gold paper, like.
Yeah.
We might get a book, something like that, but we didn't get any big presents at all. I was a war baby. I was a baby boomer, born in 46. So we were still getting over the war. I mean, I never saw a banana till 1954.
Have you had a banana for Christmas since?
I've had a banana since, yeah.
So I explained to Mike, I mean, I grew up in the 70s.
Okay.
So I explained to my kids now, who were moaning because, when are you putting the heating on? When are you putting the heating on? And I always end up saying, listen, when I was a kid, the ice was on the inside of the window. And they say, you're making it up, Dad, you're making it up.
You're right.
And you're going to confirm.
Oh, yeah, well, I mean, absolutely. Well, we never had central heating. You know, in them days, no matter how not well off you are, you had 3 meals every day, pretty much, some way, one way or another. It wasn't an expensive meal, but you had 3. And then you'd have your Christmas dinner at about... Or it always had to be before the Queen's speech, whatever time that come on.
3 o'clock, I think, yeah.
So we'd have to be finished and cleared away by 3 o'clock for the Queen's speech. My dad would obviously go down the pub before Christmas dinner, you know, and he'd come back a bit tiddly.
Yeah.
And then at tea time, what you did in them days as well, we generally got to one of my grands, where either my dad's family were, my uncles and aunts, would be with their kids, or my mum's, and we go to their house for tea. You'd have tea.
That was
it. You know, and you'd have, like, because it was Christmas Day, you might have a salmon sandwich or an ham sandwich.
That was it.
Yeah, and a jelly. You always had jelly and ice cream as well.
You mentioned before about your dad being a window cleaner. Did I get this right? Did you use his van once to drop Robert Plant off at a gig?
Always used him. When my band at the time wasn't working, this is pre-Slade.
Yeah.
Pre-In-Betweens as we were originally.
That's right.
Pre that, I was in another band, and when we went and got gigs, Planty's band, they were originally called the Tennessee Teens, then they became a
Planty's band.
Yeah. Then they were called Listen, and if they hadn't got, they never got any transport, they never got any gear half the time.
Yeah.
So I used to loan them gear, and I used to drive them around in my dad's van to gigs, and I used to set the stuff up for him and that, because Planty, even in them days, he was a poser. I mean, you wouldn't see him setting the equipment up. No way.
Some things never change. Some things never change.
But I mean, we used to get on great.
Well, you've been a roadie for Elton John.
I have.
In cartoon form, if you like. Because you were a roadie called Banger.
I was.
In Bob the Builder.
It's weird, really, because at the time that was out, and since people still buy it now, but at the time it was out, little kids, like I'm talking under 8 years old.
Well, it's 20 years old that now.
Is it really?
Yeah,
oh, my
20
word.
years old, yeah.
But little kids, they used to come up to me, and they didn't know anything about Slade particularly, but they knew me as Banger. They recognised me voice if they saw me in a shop or in a cafe or anything. They'd recognise me voice more so.
Well, Chris Evans was in it. Elton John was in it. Alison Steadman was in it.
Alison Steadman was the Lady Mayoress. And she got the hots for me. She wanted a bit of rough, so she sort of fell in love with me.
These Crosby girls.
Yeah. So that was, it was a great experience to be in that, because people forget how huge Bob the Builder was.
Christmas number 1.
It was, certainly.
Yeah.
And it was massive TV viewing as well for kids. And it was great, because I went in the studio to do it like with the cast. With Neil Morrissey as Banger, as Bob, and the rest of them. And we had such a laugh. I mean, we did have a laugh. I dread to think what the outtakes are like, because
I can imagine.
It got a bit leery.
Because she was called, Alison Steadman played the mayoress, her name was Bunty.
That's it, Bunty.
And I think at one stage you went, "Come here, I'll catch you, Bunty, love." Something like that, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I remember that. Listen, you mentioned Robert Plant before, 72, 73. One of the main reasons that we wanted to talk to you today was 50 years ago. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Aye.
And the similarities between 1973 and 2023.
Yep.
Politically,
yep.
Cost of living crisis, oil crisis, trouble in the Middle East. I'm going to play a little clip of Harold Wilson, if that's all right.
Okay.
And then we'll talk about we'll talk some more in a second.
The power crisis presents us all with perhaps the gravest situation we have faced since the war. We have to suffer the consequences of both astronomical oil prices and a reduction in our essential oil supplies. Pensioners and others on low fixed incomes must be protected and helped. At least pensioners should be given the protection of the threshold agreement provided for wage and salary earners in the government stage 3 as soon as the cost of living rises to 7% above this autumn's level. And excessive wage claims, which today are demanded out of fear of rapid price rises, will no longer be the order of the day.
Well, you wouldn't believe it's 50 years ago and the same thing's happening now.
It's uncanny, isn't it?
It's a parallel. It wasn't just the oil crisis. I mean, I remember cars because I was on the road and touring a lot. and cars had to, the speed limit was 50 mile an hour to save petrol.
Yeah.
And of course it affected all other things. The power was going off over Christmas time when our record was out. The electric was going off at 10 o'clock at night because there were coal strikes which couldn't provide the electric. So you'd had no telly after 10 o'clock. The grave diggers were on strike. Firemen were on strike. They brought the army out to cope with fires. It's pretty much a parallel to what's going on now. War in the Middle East. It's just the same.
I was 8 years of age at the time. And when you're 8, you don't pick up on it on this. When you're an adult, you do.
Yeah,
but when you're 8, you don't.
Yeah.
It's only when you become an adult that you realise that you were shielded from this very, very difficult situation.
That's true.
But I think bands like Slade and Wizard and Bay City Rollers and all of that stuff at the time kind of lifted the
spirit,
the national mood.
Yep.
Did it feel like that at the time?
It did. It did feel like that. I'm a big sort of history waller. My favourite period is the 20s. But you have to remember at that time as well, showbiz played a big part of people's lives. You know, you'd got the Charleston, you got the Flapper Girls, you got all that going on. You got the silent movies. That period was lifting people's spirits in the times of the Depression. And I think the same thing happened in the early 70s. You had glam rock, which on a Thursday night, you put the telly on, top of the pops, everything was colourful and sparkly. Behind the scenes, if you saw the scenery at top of the pops, you probably wouldn't think so. But of course, as it come over on television, everybody loved it. And on a Thursday night, the whole family sat and watched that show, either having the tea in front of the telly or whatever. And 18 million viewers was the average. So if you made a good impression on Top of the Pops, you got a hit record. And it was so important to music at that time. But it did raise people's spirits, and particularly at Christmas, especially with our Christmas record. I mean, the big line at the end of the chorus is, look to the future now, it's only just begun.
You recorded that song was it the Hit Factory in New York? You recorded that song in a blazing summer in September.
Yeah.
Quite hard to believe that, because the feel of it is, it's cold, it's Christmassy, it's icy.
Yeah. And we didn't do anything in the studio to make it Christmassy at all. In fact, it was the hardest song we ever had to record.
Why?
Because Don, our drummer, had a car crash just 2 months before. And his girlfriend had been killed in the car crash. And he was in a coma for a week, in and out of a coma. And he was in a tent, when they put all the pipes in you and all that, in intensive care. And when it happened, they didn't give him 24 hours to live. And he survived. And 6 weeks later, the doctor said, if you don't get him behind the kit now, you'll never know whether he can ever play the drums again.
Did he have to relearn?
He had to relearn. And the trouble was, he had no memory and he had no taste or smell. He can remember long term. He can remember 50 years ago, but he can't remember an hour ago.
Really?
Still. And he had no taste or smell, which he still hasn't got.
So how did he remember the patterns?
The patterns, at the time, we could not record Merry Christmas Everybody from start to finish. It's nearly 4 minutes long. He could not remember that. So we had to put it like a jigsaw puzzle. We had to get him to play a little bit of beat, and then we'd get him to do another little beat, and ram it together. Then we'd have to overdub the bits. Like usually before the accident, we'd all have to go in the studio, play as we played live, do a few overdubs, and that was the record. We'd got it done in, the Lord knows, we'd finished the whole thing in 2 or 3 hours, and then it just got to be mixed, and it was in the shops pretty much the next day. Or Merry Christmas, it was a long, drawn-out process because of him.
That must have been frustrating for him, though, and for you, but you loved him. He was a brother in the band.
Absolutely. And this went on for 2 or 3 years with all our recordings. It was the same. Merry Christmas happened to be the first one. And it was a complicated sort of arrangement, particularly for him, because he couldn't even remember the hits, let alone a brand new song. So it was a bit of a, it was a long, drawn-out process to get it down. And we didn't think we'd got it down properly. We really didn't think, this can't work doing it like this. Because we never were used to doing jigsaws, bit of this here, bit of that there, and trying to, mismatch it and whatever. It's getting the sounds to match and all sorts. Because, if you're doing bits at a time, he's not hitting the drums at exactly the same power all the time.
Yeah.
And we went on the road to do some live dates, which there again, he couldn't remember the date. So the songs on the date. So while I'm talking to the audience, Jim would be whispering in his ear. It starts like this. He'd whisper the intro in his ear. Then once he got that, he could get through the rest of the song. But that also went on for years. We had to do that on live shows.
So nobody knew about this then?
Nobody knew. No, nobody knew. Everybody knew he'd got no memory and no taste or smell, but they didn't know how bad he was. And anyway, while we were out in the States, we were doing these shows in the States and warming back up. Because we couldn't have done it in Europe because it was so huge in Europe. We couldn't have possibly got away with it. But in America, we're doing some smaller shows, so we got away with it. And anyway, we thought, well, what they're going to do with this record, And we left it to Chaz and the engineer in New York.
This is Chaz Chandler,
Chaz Chandler, our producer and manager. And he was there mixing it with the engineer. And the engineer was a clever cookie. And he got it all done. And we got back to New York after doing some shows touring round, and they played it to us, and you couldn't tell, it sounded great. And we hadn't told the record company that we were doing a Christmas song. They'd been on to us for years, because we'd already had 5 number ones at this point. We'd had Lord knows how many top 3s, and they kept pushing us. You got to bring out a record at Christmas time. We got not a Christmas record they didn't want, they just wanted a release at Christmas time. And we hadn't told them we'd got one in the can. And Chaz said, we'll have one ready for you for this Christmas. We'll have a song ready for you, a record ready for you. So while we were carried on touring in the States, Chaz took the tapes back to London to play to the record company to say, this is what we're giving you for Christmas. And of course, when they heard it, God, they loved it. They said, this is going to be a monster. And now we weren't sure. We weren't absolutely sure.
What were you not sure about?
We weren't sure which was the right thing to be doing, bringing out a Christmas song. Leonard had done it the year before. That's the only reason we thought it was a bit kosher to do. Jim's mother-in-law had challenged him, you'll never be able to write a song like White Christmas or something.
So this is Jim Lee, this is your partner.
Jim Lee.
He wrote this with you, didn't he?
He did. And he wrote all this. We wrote pretty much all the songs together. And his mother-in-law had challenged him. You'll never be able to do a White Christmas. And Jim, you're just being silly, And he never even give it the time of day, Jim. Yeah. Then he thought, well, I'm going to show off to her. I'm going to prove that we can. And he remembered a song that I'd written way back in 1967, which was the first song I'd ever written. And it was a song in the hippy-dippy psychedelic days. Yeah. And it was called Buy Me a Rocking Chair. And it went, so won't you buy me a rocking chair to watch the world go by? Buy me a looking glass to look me in the eye. And he remembered that. And he said, I remember that chorus and that song you had way back then. And it had been thrown in the bin at the time because all the band said, rubbish. And in the bin it went, which was always that's how the band worked, It had to be a majority decision.
You're all honest with each other.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And Jim says, I've got a new verse melody to that chorus. And I said, okay. And he said, I want to show me mother-in-law it can be a Christmas song. So I went away on the night and went to the local pub in Wolverhampton and went back to my mum and dad's after. And I sat up all night with a bottle of whiskey and wrote the total lyrics that night in one fell swoop and went back over to Jim's the next day and played it to him. And he says, well, I like it. He says, let's go and play it to Chaz. He says, because Chaz, we hadn't even played it the band this point, because if Chaz said no, didn't like it.
Yeah.
It was, you know...
Because Chaz had a track record, Animals and all of that stuff.
Oh, Chaz was in the Animals, and he discovered and produced Jimi Hendrix.
Exactly. So
he had a track record.
He had a track record.
And he could spot a hit. Our first number one record, Because I Love You, he spotted it. We'd written it in 20 minutes, me and Jim. We didn't think he got a chance of being a hit, but we took it to him, played it to him on an acoustic guitar, Jim on the violin, me singing, played it to Chaz. He says, I don't even think you've written your first hit. I think you've written your first number one record.
He was
and
right.
we went, oh, God, Chaz, it's not a number one record, this. But we went in, recorded it, we put it down in about an hour. It didn't sound like Slade, I have to say. Not that the hit we'd had before, Get Down and Get With It, which was very raucous.
It was completely different, wasn't it, really?
Boot stamping, hand clapping.
Yeah.
And we thought, how do we Sladeify this? We put boot stamping and hand clapping on it, which we did, and immediately came to life as a Slade song then. And he was right, it went to number one in 2 weeks.
I won't laugh at you when you boo-hoo-hoo, 'cause I love you. You get me in a spot that's how
I remember the first time it came on radio. We'd been warned it was coming on radio. And I think we were on the motorway in the van, and we pulled the van aside because we knew about what time it was coming on. So we pulled on the hard shoulder on the old M1 as was in them days.
Yeah.
And put it hard and turned it up, and it come on. And I mean, it sounded great on the radio.
Yeah.
You know, we'd only ever heard it in the studio. But it was a great radio record as well. We thought, my God, this is good.
They were mixed for little speakers.
They were mixed for little speakers, exactly.
Yeah.
That's how we used to mix in the studio. We had these tiny speakers in the studio. We would like to hear a big, full pelt in
Yeah,
the
but
big
nobody
ones.
had them at home.
Nobody had them at home. So we had little ones to try the radio sound on. And we always mixed for radio as well. And it sounded great, and then it started our career. I mean, the snowball then that went on, we were just churning them out.
Yeah,
and it was great.
So did you know at the time Roy Wood and Wizard had a Wish It Could Be Christmas Every Day out? Because it was almost like a Blair Oasis race to number one with the song, wasn't it? It was a parallel.
And we were big mates with Woody and Wizard. Well, I mean, we knew him really well.
Well, he smashed you in the face with a custard pie on top of the Pops, I think, didn't he?
He did.
Yeah.
But I knew him in his original band he was in called Mike Sheridan and the Night Riders. So we knew him through all his career. You know, they were all Birmingham musos, so we knew them all because we did the same gigs as one another. And there was a big flux of great bands in the Midlands and great musicians. You know, there was the Moody Blues, there was a Spencer Davies group. There was so many great bands in the Midlands, and we all sort of knew one another. And of course, we'd been in America, as I say, for the bulk of 73 on and off, and touring the world in 73. So we didn't know what Woody was up to. We knew he'd had out See My Baby Jive in June, which was, I think, his, it was just such a great record.
Well, he was on the Christmas Top of the Pops doing that.
I think he probably was.
He was, yeah.
And it was like a number one record. So we knew he'd had that because we'd heard that in America. And anyway, we didn't know what he'd been up to and that he was thinking of bringing a Christmas record out. But he'd obviously had the same idea as us from how Lennon had done it the year before, made it cool, as it were. And of course, Elton John was doing the same thing, which we didn't know either.
Step Into Christmas.
So there was 3 Christmas records out that Christmas. We all got released in the first week of December. But the thing was with ours, we had such a huge following. We'd already had 5 number ones, plus all the other hits we'd had. So we had this massive live following. We had this massive record buying following. And when the record company heard it, they said, we're going to put everything behind this record. We're going to have it pressed, because the pressing plants were chock-a-block. They had to press up in Germany, France. We even were pressing up in LA because they couldn't cope with the demand. And we knew we were on a good run because even before the day of release, we had 500,000 pre-orders.
Wow.
Which pretty much guaranteed us a number one in those days, and a straight in at number one. We'd already that year, 73, we'd had Come On Feel the Noise straight in at 1, Squeeze Me Please Me straight in at 1. Then Don had his accident, of course. And then But the record company was pretty sure we could get in at number one again, 3 in 1 year. Nobody had ever done that, including the Beatles or anybody. And at that point in time, and they said, well, the pre-sales are it's going to take it to number one. And it did, went to number one first day release, which Woody wasn't happy about.
Did he get to 2?
Now he got to 4.
To 4?
In the end. Yeah.
I must have been blazing.
He was blazing because it's a great record.
It is.
And anyway, that's why he threw a custard pie in my
Is that
face.
what it was? Yeah.
But then the first day after it went to number one, the first day of you got your pre-orders, and then the first day of reordering around the country in the shops, we did 300,000 in one day, reorders. We couldn't, it's unheard of. Record company was going
Crazy.
Over the moon.
I bet they were.
They were making serious dough from us, and it was incredible, really. And then it just sold and sold, and in the 2 or 3 weeks up to Christmas, we did 1 million.
Well, that's what you got when you were a kid. You got a record voucher for a present.
Yeah.
When you were a kid.
Yeah. And don't forget, people at Christmas, people buy records that don't buy the rest of the year.
Correct.
So we had all age groups. It wasn't just Slade fans buying Merry Christmas, everybody. You had grannies buying it and, for their grandkids and all. You have a mass market at Christmas. That's why the charts become so weird over Christmas time.
Is it true, Noddy, that to this day you go on Christmas morning, you're the first up, and you go and shout, "It's Christmas" at your missus?
Yeah.
Is that true?
Right down her ear.
I bet she loves that.
She said, "No," and she always goes, "Not again."
Not again. It's not it again, is it? Not it again. Yeah, that's nice.
But I always catch her out, yeah. It's like a thing, yeah. And I do dress up as Santa. I've got my old, stage Santa outfit that I used to
still got that?
drag it out every Christmas, yeah.
What happened to the big mirrored top hat?
The mirrored top hat is in a bank vault. It's a bit knocked about now because it went on many world tours, but I would never get rid of it. And I locked it in a bank vault because I did loan it out once to a museum for a glam rock exhibition thing. Yeah, and it come back damaged, so I didn't. I'll never loan it out anymore. And it's in a bank vault in New York.
Still fit?
Well, I haven't tried it on for a long time, but I know it's safe there.
It's
Unless the bank burns down or whatever.
Safe.
But, as far as I know, it would fit. My head's probably shrunk now, and I haven't got the big bushy hair that I had in them
probably
days.
come down over your ears.
Probably come down, drop down over my ears.
Who's done a version of Merry Christmas, Everybody, that you think, that's nailed it? That's a great version.
Oh, Lordy.
I mean, it's everybody, not everybody, but there's been a lot of people.
There has been a lot. I don't think there's been any that I think are off the wall, know. I know this. The good thing that's good for us, particularly me and Jimmy as writers, is it gets covered and it gets used so much in adverts. Not only our version, but this year, there's a TV ad out at the moment, and it's even being shown now. Yeah. And they're using it, but they're using the Girls Aloud version.
Right, okay.
Which is a good version.
But you wrote it.
We wrote it.
So you'll get the royalties for that.
Yeah. And I think Steps have done it. Loads of people play it on their tour. Spice Girls did it on their tour. Yeah. And so every time it's played by another act or, it's recorded by another act, we get paid. Max Bygraves did it way back in the 70s.
Are you telling me that's the best version?
No, I'm not telling you that. But it made a few bob for us. Maxie's, them albums, his Sing-Along a Maxie, used to sell a lot of records.
That was the thing.
James Last did it in Germany. Yeah. He was a huge selling artist in Europe, James Last Orchestra. He did several of our songs.
So you hear a lot of artists who have to fight for royalties and the correct royalties. Has that ever been an issue with you?
Yeah, of course, in the very early days, of course. Yeah, absolutely. But with the advent of computerisation and things now, PRS and PPL, they keep pretty much a check around the world as much as can be. Streaming. You earn nothing off streaming at the moment.
Even you?
Even us.
Really?
You get a fraction of a penny every time.
So this song that's 50 years old, that's on pretty much everything everywhere at the moment.
Yeah.
On every
If
Christmas
it's streamed,
compilation, if it's streamed, you get...
Not a big earner. You earn, of course you earn, but you only earn a tiny amount. I mean, with us, like, I think Merry Christmas has something currently like something like 122 million streams. So, of course, if you could pay a fraction on every play, you've earned a few bob off it, you know. But, of course, your normal act...
You're not getting anything.
You're making nothing. These days, back in the 70s, you sold tons of records, tons. If you got number one or a big seller, you could sell millions of records around the world. And you went on tour to promote the record. These days, you sell records or you sell streams. You don't earn a lot from the records, so you go on tour to make the money these days.
The money's in the touring.
Totally the other way around.
Right, so you earn your living in the touring now.
Touring, merchandising, all that. It's totally turned around now from what it was in back in then.
So you could never have envisaged that night that you sat up all night with a bottle of whiskey, writing Merry Christmas, everybody, that you would be at this point now,
No way.
50 years on.
No way.
I mean, you couldn't, could you?
No
Really?
way. No
Does that
way.
surprise you sometimes?
I mean, records didn't last that long. Pop music didn't last that long.
It was
then.
disposable, wasn't it?
Yeah, easily disposable.
It's different with the Christmas stuff. If you get the right Christmas
If you get the right one. But that's only in retrospect.
Yeah.
It didn't always happen, not since the crooner days. Pop, Christmas hits didn't really last forever. But I think ours was probably the first one that sustained it for everybody that did carry on, because everybody started to do them then,
exactly.
year on year out.
Because it wasn't always a thing, wasn't it?
No, it wasn't a
always
thing. No.
There's been parodies as well. What about Vic and Bob and Slade in Residence? Tell me about
Vic
that.
and Bob, we used to love Vic and Bob.
And Paul Whitehouse as well,
Yes,
I think.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Paul Whitehouse was Jimmy in Slade, in Residence. And
Slade in Residence.
and then when Slade Go Camping was the next series.
That's right.
I mean, I knew Vic and Bob anyway because I'd done Shooting Stars with them and stuff like that. I'd done the pilot of Shooting Stars with them, and I'd done a couple of the episodes, and I done some of their tour dates when they took it on the road. So we did get on, and they were big Slade fans. I mean, you can tell by watching the spoof on us that they were big Slade fans. And they are lovely. They're so funny, the pair of them.
I've got a little clip if you want to hear it.
Have you all gone?
Yeah, there's a little clip, isn't it?
I've been trying this new washing up liquid that you got me from the sales, you know. And to be honest, I'm not that impressed, really. It won't ship this grand on cuppa soup from last night's dinner. I've been trying 3 hours.
That's not cuppa soup, Dave. It's red pints. I was pinting me Huey Smuts to truck muddle last night. Truck pints!
Makes me sick, you
It was cracking. The thing was, when that come out, of course, cuppa soup was a big thing in the show.
Yeah.
And whenever people used to see me in a supermarket, they'd follow me around and see if I was buying cuppa soup.
Yeah.
It was really funny. And I don't know whether Dave found it so funny. I don't think Dave got it originally at all, but I think he's learned to love it now. But, like, when something happens like that, the youth who watch that show start to look at your catalogue.
Yeah.
When Oasis did covers of Come On Feel the Noise, and they start to look at your back catalogue, their audience.
Everything's going well, and then as time moves on, it's peaked and it's on its way down.
As happens with everybody.
But then, was it Reading that came along? Ozzy Osbourne couldn't do it.
Ozzy's new band wasn't ready. Of course, Ozzy was a big pal of ours. We grew up with him in the Midlands.
And you stepped in.
And we knew Sabbath really well.
So at this point, when you stepped in, where were the band?
Finished. Because we weren't selling records. We'd all sort of got a bit tired with it, that we were having to battle to get radio play, battle to get any media attention, interviews, whatever. We're still pulling audiences here and in Europe, but it wasn't enough to sustain back in those days. And David had enough pretty much, and he left. Anyway, Ozzy, he pulled out because his new band, called the Blizzard of Oz, wasn't ready. We tried for 3 years to get on Reading. They would not have us. We were too uncool for Reading. And we knew this. It always happened through all our career. We were uncool, that we wouldn't have us on various things. So we weren't surprised. Anyway, I think they'd tried a long list of people to step in at 2 or 3 days' notice to replace Ozzy. And eventually they got down the list to us. I think we were bottom of the list. And they called up and said, will you do it? And Chaz called me, Chaz Chasner, and he said, Reading are after you to replace Ozzy. And he said, will you do it? I said, I'll do it. I said, but I'm not so sure about the rest of them. I called Jim. He says, yeah, I'll do it. I called Don. He says, yes, I'll do it. I called Dave. He went, I'm not doing it. I've said I'm finished, and that's it. I've finished. So I went back to Chaz, said, 3 are in favour. Dave won't do it. He says, let me talk to Dave. And he could always spell Dave. And the sort of line he gave to Dave was, instead of petering out, as we probably would have done, he said, go out on a big show. And we're talking like 50,000 punters out there. And he said, all right. Eventually he talked him round anyway. And without any rehearsals, we hadn't played together for probably 3 or 4 months. We went down. We had no backstage passes or nothing because it was 2 days' notice. There was no internet then to post us the stuff. You know, we had to take potluck and just get there and arrive.
Did they let you in?
Well, we pulled the car in the public car park. We got our guitars and cases at the boot. Walked through the public car park to the backstage area. We had no passes. Of course, we knew all the security guards. They'd all worked for us.
Sure.
At Wembley and wherever else we'd paid in the past. So we knew them. And they went, what are you lot doing here? Because it weren't announced that we were coming. There was a rumour going round that Ozzy wasn't doing it, but they didn't know who was going to replace. And don't forget, these were young metalers, you know, this audience. Wasn't our sort of audience at all. Well, so we thought. And we come to the backstage and they said, oh, come on then. We said, oh, we've come, we're playing tonight. We're replacing Ozzy. And I went, really? Yeah. So we went to our caravan backstage to get ready. So we went on, did our usual set. The pit in front of the stage was empty. You know, where the media go, the radio people and the press people. Totally empty. They were all in the bar backstage.
They'd just gone.
They'd just announced Slade were coming to be the replacement. Nobody had the slightest interest. And we walked on stage and the crowd cheered.
Is it loud enough for everybody? No.
The cheers just built. And then I did some chat after the first couple of numbers. And it just grew and grew and grew and grew. After the first 2 numbers, all from the backstage was in the pit. The pit was full. And what we hadn't realised was these kids who were out there, these young metalers, had grown up with our songs and bought them, but never seen us live because they were too young.
But you blew it away.
We blew it away.
You blew it away.
By the time we got to the end, the crowd were going berserk.
And this is in August.
This is in August, bank holiday. And we come off and the promoters at the side of the stage, they said, get back on, the promoter was saying it, which they never do to an act that's not on the top of the bill. They roared even more when we come back on. I said, what do you want to hear? And they were all shouting, Merry Christmas. I said, I'm not singing Merry Christmas. I said, if you want to hear it, you sing it. So they all started singing it, and then we all joined in with them. It's August bank holiday.
Let's hear you lot sing it. Let's hear you lot.
And then we did another couple of encores after.
That was almost like a restart for you then, wasn't it?
But it was all an accident. It was, if Ozzy hadn't cancelled, it would never have happened.
Yeah, but an accident, but kind of meant to be.
Yeah, but we would have finished. We'd have gone.
Did Ozzy ever say, because I never turned up?
He probably did at some point. He probably did.
He probably did.
Yeah.
I've got a little clip of, it's Tony Blackburn and Noel Edmonds, and they're going to introduce you on Top of the Pops here. So let me just play you this.
Hope you're all having a lovely Christmas at home. Shall we see if we can hit them at home with one of these streamers? Wait a minute. We leave you, and we wish you a very Merry Christmas from everybody here at Top of the Pops. We leave you with the sound of... the number 1 sound, Slade. Well, it's Slade. Merry Christmas, everybody. Bye-bye.
You know how that goes, though. You don't need to hear that again, do you? You don't need to hear that again. The time...
No, play it again, because the bank manager will be happy.
There's another sixpence. There's another sixpence for you. What was it like to be as a viewer, this is amazing. This is Hollywood in my front room. This is colourful. This is just the best day ever. The reality of Top of the Pops, is it different?
It's mind-blowing, especially when you're doing a TV in front of that big an audience. I mean, we were probably the hottest band in UK at that time. We were the biggest selling singles band in the UK during the 70s, which people don't realise. But we were in terms of sales. And, of course, me and Dave particularly, we couldn't go anywhere. You know, we were sort of, certainly in the heyday of the early 70s, we were mobbed wherever we went.
Did you like that attention?
I loved it. So did Dave. But Don and Jim, absolutely no way. Particularly Jim, hated the attention. Or so he used to say. I think he secretly loved it, but he always would say he hated it.
He likes the royalties.
Yeah, well, he loves the royalties. But me and Dave, you know, we were so instantly recognisable because we were on Top of the Pops virtually every week with one record or another. Yeah. We didn't really know how big we were because the only gauge we'd got was selling out the concerts and getting number one records. We didn't know how it had stretched into the psyche of your general public.
You've loved your life.
Great life.
Yeah.
Great life. I'll tell you what's another thing. Now I'm thinking about 73 as compared to today.
Yeah.
It's a strange thing, but I hear now as the government are doing now, how it's the highest tax rate ever in the history of the country. Now, I can put them a bit right on that, because in 1973, we were paying 93 pence per pound. That was our tax rate.
So was
in
that
73?
Was that because of the industry you were in, or because of the money that you were earning?
Money we were earning, of course. And that's why everybody moved out. All the rock stars, film directors, film actors.
I read about that you stayed here.
We stayed.
Because...
And silly us, because we thought our money's going in the coffers, it'll help to get the debt of the country, back on a level scale. Of course it wasn't. It was...
You live and learn.
For want of a better word, weed up the wall, And it was strange, and people think, you must have earned a fortune them days. We did earn a fortune, but we also paid a hell of a lot in taxes.
Knowing what you know now, what would you have done differently, do you think?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. The only thing, but what I wish we'd have done as a band would have been able to get bigger hit records in America, particularly a number one in America. I would have loved to do that, because we had number one in every other territory, and we never managed it in America.
What's the relationship like now with the rest of the band members?
Well, I won't say we see one another and has a great relationship, but that's what happens in bands. We were together for 25 years in a working relationship, and it's like 4 marriages. And I always cite it as 25 years was getting enough for me. It was I felt we were getting stale. We'd been through ups and downs, ins and outs, and we were on another bit of a lull. As I said earlier, my dad was ill. I've gone through divorce, so my personal life was a bit in upheaval. And I said to the others, I'm going to knock it on the head for a while. You can get another singer in if you want or whatever. We just pretty much got fed up with one another, really.
Are you friends?
I wouldn't say we're not friends. We don't communicate a lot. If I'm in Wolverhampton, if I'm passing through Wolverhampton, I go and see Dave now. We've all had to build bridges. I built bridges with Dave because, of course, Dave and Dom went out on the road in a Slade Mark II version.
Did you try and stop that?
I didn't. Jim didn't want him to do it, but I didn't, because I thought we've been making the money from writing royalties. Yeah. I mean, a lot of money. So we made more money than they did. And I said, well, I can't stop them having a living. But we had a few business hassles along the way, all 4 of us. But with me and Dave, you see, he can phone me up. He knows if he's got a beef or I've got a beef with him, we can phone one another. There's no problem. We've never fell out. We've had Barneys, but that's the way.
Yeah, but that's mates.
The way of the world.
That's mates.
Of course it is.
Yeah.
And so whenever I'm in Wolverhampton, I call him up. I say, can I come round for a cup of tea or something? He says, yeah, of course.
Can you come and do me drive? Because he used to work for Tarmac, didn't he?
He did.
He did. Come and do me drive.
He did. Anyway, I'll go round and then we'll probably have a cup of tea and a sandwich and whatever.
Nice.
And He's not changed, Dave. He's just the same. He's an eccentric. He was an eccentric when I met him, and he's still an eccentric now. And he remembers stuff from the past that I can't remember, and vice versa. So we do have a laugh at things, because he'll bring up something, and then he'll say, "Don't you remember when we did this, that, and the other?"
Didn't he break his leg and wrapped it in...
yes.
Broke his leg and
Here,
wrapped it in tin foil?
in Liverpool. He did it at the boxing arena in Liverpool.
Oh, the stadium.
Yeah, he broke it there. He was dragged off stage. And he broke his leg, and he did the rest of the tour in a wheelchair with his leg in plaster, but with
tin foil,
covered in tin foil. And he used to be in this wheelchair, and I used to really, scare him, because we'd bring him on at the start of the show, the follow-up shows, and the crowd would go in Wally. And I'd take him to the edge of the stage and pretend I was going to tip him into the crowd.
I bet he loved it. Yeah. He loved it. Noddy, I've got one final thing I want to mention, and it's something that Noel Gallagher said. He said, "No Slade, no Oasis." When you heard that, what did you think?
It's nice, good. I'm glad, and there again, with Oasis there, audience went and looked at our back catalogue and started to buy some of our stuff. It was weird because they were top of the tree at the time, and on their return gig at Main Road in Manchester, their return show, they invited me, Noel invited me, and I sat in a box and watched the show. They were going down a storm, of course. It was the home audience. They were going down great. And they came on, and he sent his missus up to the box where I was sitting to get a picture of me, because when they come on for the encore, they did come on for all the noise. Wow. And he wanted a picture of my reaction. Of course, all the crowd was singing along because they thought it was an Oasis song and were singing along to it, And I loved Oasis because I'm a big fan of rock and roll, what I call rock and roll bands.
Rock and roll.
Yeah. There are rock bands and there are rock and roll bands. You look to U2, you look to Queen, you look to bands like that. They are rock bands. We were a rock and roll band. Stones are a rock and roll band. The Beatles were a rock and roll band. And Oasis, to me, come in that category. And they're probably the last.
Noddy, it's a pleasure to see you doing well.
I've enjoyed it, yeah.
Thanks very much for all the pleasure that you've given many, many people over the years.
Thank you.
And Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, everybody!
I knew you'd do that. Thanks, Nod.
I believe